y'all. Welcome back to Resilient and Rowdy. This is your host, Jess. And today I have a fellow JJ on the pod. Welcome, Jackie Jones.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Growing up, I was called JJ a lot, and that hasn't happened in a long time. So it makes me happy that you say that.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah, my dad is also a JJ. So I was like, ooh, okay, something like my daddy. But yeah, welcome to Resilient and Rowdy. Jackie Jones. I was doing my creeping on Instagram and I saw this really great person doing some awesome things. I'm always just trying to educate my audience and let them in the loop of exciting and different topics. Jackie Jones does a plethora of things. I am honored to have someone like her today. So, Jackie, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here. My name's Jackie Jones. I am from Silver Spring, Maryland, and I grew up there before it got commercialized, before it was like sprung, as they say. That happened when I was in college. It was a beautiful place to grow up. I'm extremely grateful for where I grew up. It felt like when I went to all of my best friends' houses, it was like stepping into Vietnam or stepping into Guatemala or stepping into Pakistan. It was a really special upbringing. Just every day in class, getting to know how much exists in the world with friends outside of school. And my parents, my mom's side is Jewish, my dad's side is Protestant. And that also played into things because they raised us to be exploring and experiencing things from both sides. But then beyond that, too, like exploration and curiosity was a really big part of growing up. And we weren't told, we were exposed to different things, but not told what to think or what to believe. So set the stage for self-exploration to be really okay and valued. And then beyond that, from as long as I can remember, art making was a big important part of my life. I'd play with my mom's camera when I was really little. When they would have yard sales, I would sell like little tiny paintings I would make. I'd fall asleep with art supplies in my bed. It was very much a part of my daily life. And my parents very much supported it, which I know looking back, I can see was really lucky. It was fortunate. So they really supported my love of art and they really supported my need to follow my soul's callings too. Junior year of high school, I was a foreign exchange student in Italy. I went to an art high school in Naples. And looking back, I know that would have been hard for a lot of parents to let but they were very supportive of that. And that was a big part of my journey as well. Growing up, I learned early on that when I was feeling any sort of way, art would make me feel better. So it was always a coping skill for me. As I got older and started dealing with health issues and anxiety from different things going on in life, that set me on a journey that kind of led me to doing more holistic health things too. So I'm just set the stage with a few different threads, like exploring the world out of curiosity, but also whenever I'd feel my light get dim, really tapping into my soul's calling and pursuing that, always utilizing art, always standing up for the value of it. And then all the health things leading down a holistic healing path. Fast forward to now, and it's all melded together very beautifully. I think that's a good start. We can
I
go
love
deeper.
that. I am so glad to hear how supportive your family was about what you were passionate about and the things that brought joy to your heart. And also your ability to connect the two. I think the creative process is really beautiful, especially if you're able to witness it as a parent, as a friend, as someone just on social media, that you were able to hone in like your thoughts, feelings, and emotions and embracing that on pen and paper or through the creative process. And yeah, there's a lot of studies about that stuff and how that can really heal. Some people might assume whatever they might assume, but that's what I'd love to talk to you about, how you can connect both mind and heart through the arts. I'm sorry to hear that you've had some health issues. That's never easy. Also, having that open mind to being able to put your foot down and be like, traditional medicine isn't working. Let's try something different. Most people might be a little hesitant or skeptical, but I would definitely love to know more about that. Growing up, very passionate about art, you decided to pursue that through education as well. What was that like?
Knowing my soul's calling, even in kindergarten, when they say, "What do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up?" Even from then, I was saying art teacher. We had an art teacher at the elementary school that was a wonderful influence. By the time I was in fourth and fifth grade, she made arrangements with my teachers where she'd pull me from class sometimes and let me teach lessons to the kindergartners and first graders. So I already started to tap into that when I was really little. And then growing up, I always did volunteer work associated with connecting with people through art or helping people through art. When I was in senior year of high school, I was in a used bookstore and followed my interests and wound up finding that the art and psychology sections met one book that was on art therapy. And so I picked it up, took it home. I realized that art therapy was a thing. When I was looking at schools to go to, I was torn between wanting to go for art education or graphic design or art therapy. And if you looked online, there were no jobs in art, or I don't even know if online was really a thing, but if you looked out in the world, art therapy wasn't a thing. There were jobs in it, but no one like a regular person hadn't heard of them. My family was worried about me to go study that because they didn't think I'd be able to find work. So I went to school for art education. Actually started in graphic design, but it was too computer based at the time. I knew I wanted to connect with people. So I went to school for art education. I got a master's in art education, but I graduated the undergrad portion early, and I spent half a year volunteering in the favelas of Brazil, working with homeless kids and moms and using art as a modality to support. But when I was there, it became pretty clear to me that I would have been able to make more of the difference I was seeking if I had an art therapy background. I came home, went to University of Maryland for college, got my master's there in art education as well. But even when I was doing that, I knew in the back of my mind eventually I was going to go down the art therapy road. The education was going to be a really important stepping stone for me, but wasn't going to be the end for me. After I finished my master's in art ed, I was an art teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools in Northern Virginia. I was in night school to gain some additional credits. I needed to go back for art therapy. When I was teaching, it became clear that I wanted to pursue art therapy because things would come up in the art and it wasn't my role to process them. And I didn't love that I was creating the environment and the containers that genuine self expression was encouraged, and then certain things would naturally come up in the artwork, but it wasn't my role. I wasn't allowed to process those things. It was my role to alert the guidance counselor, hand over the art, and then not be a part of the process of what really came up or why.
Mhm.
And so I knew that I wanted to be more on the side of actually being able to process through what was coming up and helping people in that way. So eventually, when I had all the credits I needed, I went back to school. I got my master's in art therapy at George Washington University. And that was an amazing opportunity of a program as well. My first year-long internship was at Georgetown University Hospital working with kids with cancer and blood disorders. I was drawn to that for a few reasons, but one reason was that my last year teaching, I had a kid with cancer and he missed school a lot. I wish that I had been able to better support him, but he did mention that there was art at the hospital and he really liked that aspect. I was interested in exploring that side of things, and that was a really important internship. It was the opposite of art education because in that setting, not only was it art therapy instead of art ed, but we followed an open studio model, which means the client's guiding all the art making. That was actually pretty challenging. So coming from being a classically trained artist and then becoming an art teacher to then when you're learning to be an art therapist, learning to take way more of a back seat and follow the process that's being totally led by the client. So that was really important. A lot of things wound up coming up in the artwork, things that the kids weren't able to verbalize themselves. Or we also had a lot of kids who didn't speak English but came to that hospital from abroad because it had really good treatment. It was really powerful to see how the art therapy is what allowed us and the family members of the patients, the medical team of the patients, we could all actually see what the patient was experiencing and feeling through the artwork when words weren't available. Also, just how empowering the use of art making is when you're going through something where you feel like totally not in control of anything that's happening to you or to your body. You could just see how much empowerment came for the patients because of the art making. So that was incredible. During the summer that followed, went to India for an internship, and we worked with women who were homeless at this center in Chennai, but they were homeless because they had mental illness and their families abandoned them. Like, essentially, they would put them on the train heading south. And this clinic had an agreement with the police where if you see a homeless woman around this train station, don't put her in jail, bring her to our center, because it was just like such a pattern that had been identified. And this was also really pivotal because a lot of these women came from small villages where they spoke their local language, but not English, not Hindi. So even in this center run by medical professionals in India who spoke English and Hindi, they couldn't communicate with words to a lot of these women who spoke like very local dialects and languages. We were given a caseload of people, they called them the unchangeables, like the difficult ones, like people who they'd had for years that they weren't able to see progress with yet. And just in 3 weeks, we were able to make a lot of progress with these women because so much comes up through the art, and you can support people so much through art. It's the language of the soul. So even if you don't speak the same like human language, you can speak on a soul level and get so much really powerful information. So they wound up seeing a lot of progress. Were able to do a presentation for the medical staff at the end. And then from that, my second year-long internship was at NICO, so at the National Intrepid Center for Excellence at Walter Reed. I was there for a year in that internship program, and that really was the huge impetus for everything that I've done since.
You said it's the language of the soul, especially when there's a language barrier. And as hard as you try, sometimes you just can't connect in that way. It's almost in school or studies, or even if you happen to go to a museum of art, if you don't happen to know the artist's story and background, it's a like art literacy that you don't really have to be trained to, but sometimes you can see it in art. Like you don't have to know everything that's gone through in their lives to see what's come out on paper or canvas. I can't imagine the things expressed by the people you've helped, the homeless, kids with terminal illness. Like that's so powerful, but I'm sure there's had to be like some difficult moments with that. Were there things during those internships and experiences that it gave you like a refresher or like a reminder of this is what I'm meant to do, as difficult as it is to see them struggle, there is so much empowerment in that art. Did you ever have those moments throughout your journey?
Oh, for sure, for sure. There's a lot of people in all those scenarios that have left a huge mark on my soul for different reasons. Even in college, I was part of a volunteer program. The local school districts had cut art from their curriculum. Some people taught reading. I was part of the art program, and just seeing how much it would light up the day, the week for these kids, having that exposure to art. Art is often one of the first things to go. It's the thing where people get to genuinely self-express. People get to learn how to be good problem solvers. Even if you go into math or science, it helps your brain operate in a wider, more expanded problem solving manner. It helps with a lot of emotional issues like frustration tolerance and patience with yourself and fighting through self judgment or self rejection. It's not just cutting art, it's puts people at a disadvantage when they're not having access to those things that really help with emotional regulation and life skills aside from what the material is. So that was really powerful for them. What comes to mind when I'm thinking of like the women in India, just people who hadn't smiled for years, who like felt really, a lot of them had been so mistreated. They had like permanent burns from having parts of them set on fire and just like, really maltreated. So when we first get there, they're more like in shells of themselves. And then just seeing when you're like sitting on the floor in the exact same level, like same eye to eye level, same body to body level, same making art on the floor together. When someone feels like truly seen at a soul level, the smile that emerges from that. So just being able to be truly seen and honored as a person
Yeah.
is huge.
They're so used to being dehumanized, and especially how you said you're sitting right next to them. You're not looking down on them, like how sometimes in certain situations the student might be sitting down and the teacher is walking around. Sometimes even that body language and demeanor can really make all the difference. So beautiful that you can help unchain their soul from such brokenness. And yeah, I've heard there's a lot of parts of India where there's just so many different dialects and languages that from whatever background you are from, sometimes it can be difficult to communicate. I had no idea. I knew India was very diverse. One of my best friends is from there, but just that. And then especially in a societal aspect, a lot of people don't treat the homeless or unsheltered very well. So add that to their difficulty of trauma or just emotionally cutting themselves off because they're so used to being treated a certain way. So it's beautiful that you're able to connect with them in that way and also help and guide them. Some of them haven't smiled in years, and that just breaks my heart, but so grateful for people like you bringing that out of them. That's really wonderful what you're doing, and I love that you said that there are moments that, like, they're close to your heart. Because from the other side of things, I've been in therapy for close to 10 years now. Sometimes I do wonder, this was my favorite therapist. I wonder if they think of me because I'm thinking of them. Sometimes those breakthrough moments that happened back then will still come back as a flashback now as a gentle reminder of all the work I've done and being impressed. Oh, wow, I'm not letting this consume me, these feelings, these thoughts. It's from something that specific therapist taught me. So it's really nice to hear that from the other side. I did want to ask you more about your time at Walter Reed, if you're willing to discuss more. What were your favorite parts of that? What were things that came as a surprise to you? Do you ever check back in with the places that you've interned and worked at?
That whole experience was amazing. When I left teaching, the PTA president said to me, it was like helpful life advice, but on my way out, he knew I was going to go study art therapy. He said, whatever you don't go work with adult men. I said, why? They're just not going to get it. They're not going to respect it. They're not going to get it. So in my head, I was like, okay, challenge noted, challenge accepted. When you go to school for art therapy, you're supposed to have an experience with kids. You're supposed to also have an experience with adults and then in different settings and whatnot. I knew that I wanted a placement working with adult men in particular. If there's a reputation that they're the population not going to get this, then I definitely want to start there, get that experience under my belt. When I went to interview for that internship, I was blown away by many things. One of the reasons I knew I wasn't going to stay in teaching forever is I loved teaching, but I wasn't inspired by the career trajectory. Like I knew I wanted to get into research. I knew I wanted to be able to push the field and like the public view of art appreciation more forward. I was seeking out placements that would put me more in that realm. And the NICO at Walter Reed was a state of the art in every way. And then beyond that, the art studio was amazing. I'll never forget the day I went to interview Melissa Walker, who I wound up interning for, gave me a tour of the facility after our interview. I'll just never, like, the 5 guys were SEALs, tall, like probably 6'5", buff, like she's petite, the same size as me. And when she was giving me the tour around the clinic, these guys were just could tell, and I don't mean this in a creepy way at all, but they were just like slightly like following her around and just in so awe and in so much gratitude and appreciation of
Mm.
everything that she had been able to offer to them through the art therapy.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, there's something really special here, not just the facility, not just where it is, but also the really special impact that art therapy is making here. Definitely want to be part of this. The year interning there was amazing. People would come through and be there for an intensive month at a time. They would have 4 weeks of art therapy with us. There were 3 weeks where they did a full group, and then 1 week where we'd see them one-on-one. At around that same time, I had an uncle who was a Vietnam vet who died of an overdose. I had my mom's dad who had escaped the Holocaust and then eventually was a translator for our army. He died a couple years before I was born, and around that time, I learned that it was probably suicide that had taken his life. Not totally for sure, but at that time in my life, that was the idea that was presented. I was also in a relationship with someone from another background, and everything was great between us, but the in laws could not put their prior prejudice aside. There was a lot of war and violence enmeshed in that. In my personal art therapy classes, was doing a lot of artwork to more connect with the grandfather I had never met. There were a lot of things that were telling me go more down this route. This population needs this. They're taking their lives not just now, but from previous wars. It has an effect. Also, from being a teacher, there were certain behavioral things that would come up in kids, and you can just tell there's so much you can do to teach better behaviors within a kid, but when they're learning them from home, like the kid's not the root, the parents are. I also wanted to meet those issues more at the source and have a trickle effect that would trickle down positively to the kids. During that year, I was so blown away by the whole experience and the power of it that the same time, so that building, the NICO, was doing so well that they were about to open, they're about to break ground on a few outpatient clinics as well. So at that point, people were coming from all over the country to spend a month there. They'd get all of these assessments. They would experience all these amazing modalities from PT to acupuncture, art therapy, everything. And then they would be told, this is what's going on with you. This would be your optimal treatment plan going forward. And then they'd go home to the base where they lived. And a lot of those modalities might not have been available. So they might go back after having this huge awakening through art therapy for a month and then not have art therapy to continue on with, or have that same experience with acupuncture, something like that. So the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund, the year I was interning at NICO, announced that they were going to have many more centers like that throughout the country. And they were going to start to break ground at Fort Belvoir in Northern Virginia. I had learned that the team at Fort Belvoir, even though it was apparent how important art therapy was at NICO, wasn't going to have art therapy there. I did a bunch of presentations there about why they should have art therapy as part of their offerings. At the same time, I wrote a pilot proposal to the National Endowment for the Arts, which I was granted. They gave me a certain amount of money that was to get all the supplies needed to set up an art therapy studio and 3 months of salary. Fort Belvoir decided to give me a room. The NEA agreed to give the money. And then I had 3 months, and I started at Fort Belvoir's version of the NICO, the Intrepid Spirit one, their ribbon cutting. So I had 3 months to insert myself and prove the worth of art therapy. And within that time, it worked. So within that time, I was able to prove the worth within 3 months. It turned into a contractor position through the NEA. Fort Belvoir saw the worth of it so much that within a year, they created a GS position for me. From there, we were able to really grow. was able to grow the program and bring on another art therapist and music therapist under me there. We were also able to use the data that I had collected to prove the worth to help spread the creative arts therapies to the other satellites that were popping up around the country. And from there, everything took off. And so you ask if I'm still in touch with Walter Reed. Yeah, because we became a network, and
Mhm.
Melissa was my supervisor when I was an intern there. But after that, we were colleagues in the same Creative Forces network. We've written papers together and done presentations together and things like that.
That's amazing. I know that with anybody, but especially with men, when you suggest therapy, they're immediately like, no, I'm good. Like traditional talk therapy. But I love that this is where art therapy, music therapy, and just alternative ways of expressing yourself can come into place. Okay, there's some things that are so difficult that you don't want to verbalize that, but giving them that liberty and that freedom of expression to just see what comes out on paper or canvas or clay is beautiful. And I'm sure that it takes a lot of patience on your end to just let them be. But I will say that personally, when you're active duty in the military and you hear about these elite forces and you're just in awe. They're badass, like they're resilient. But when you get out, especially in the sector that I'm in, you start seeing more people that did amazing things. Unfortunately, sometimes the transition from military to civilian can be very difficult, and even still being in the service in general. But I've seen it more on that end of, oh, wow, like they were this, they were that, and they're really struggling. And I'm really glad to see the community shift the focus from traditional methods and medicine into something different. Hopefully, that might give them the breakthrough and the healing they need, or at least open up their minds to also try traditional talk therapy. Society can still be a little behind or naive with the impact that these things can really implement. So, what better way to show and bulldoze that movement with these badass elite Navy SEALs that have done and seen a lot of difficult things and they're struggling, if they can find healing and show up better in their lives as a better teammate, a better husband, a better friend, even just a better relationship with themselves, then that movement can pave the way for regular folks, traditional military MOSs and stuff. You don't have to just be an elite to need those things. So I'm so glad to hear that. Would you say that you experienced more folks that struggled with one thing than the other? Like you saw a lot of TBI patients, you saw more PTSD patients, or it was just a little bit of everybody?
So in those settings, oftentimes there's the TBI clinics. So to be seen there, generally you're getting tested for traumatic brain injury and being seen if you have that. If you have co-occurring PTS or psychological health conditions, then you may see more of the providers too, like more of the mental health providers as well. To prove the value of art therapy in those settings, I really had to look at the unique role of art therapy. So, getting the perspective from the clients, what are you getting from art therapy that you're not getting elsewhere? And getting the perspective from the staff, what do you notice the unique role and position of art therapy is here? A lot of times when you walk into those clinics as an art therapist, people either think you're just going to do arts and crafts and it's not going to make much of a difference, or you might have some mental health providers who are afraid you're going to step on their toes. It's really important to get at the unique way that you help so everyone knows that you're all just a piece of the same puzzle and
Yeah.
you're all important. And so the people who would wind up getting referred to me, so in at Fort Belvoir, and then after that, in 2018, I moved on to Eglin Air Force Base and helped the Air Force start their first Invisible Wound Center as well. To see me, pretty much everyone had co-occurring TBI and PTS or other psychological health conditions,
Mm.
oftentimes chronic pain as well. There were different reasons people needed to come see me, but a lot of times, like you mentioned, people being resistant to even talk therapy.
Yeah.
The idea of coming to art therapy was like, no, definitely not going to do that. Or a lot of times, if people were referred to my room, they'd open the door and see all the art stuff. And literally, one of my most often greetings was, "Why the fuck am I here?" This is how most first sessions would start. Very hesitant, very reluctant. Why the hell am I here? But oftentimes, people were referred to me because they were in other therapies and there was a block. For example, they might be in talk therapy and they may get to something that happened and they might literally not be able to talk about it like in a way to get at the source.
Mm.
Or a lot of times with TBI, people develop an auditory processing disorder and their verbal communication becomes even more inhibited than it would normally be. Or there might be lapses in memory or all these things. And then add a trauma component to it. When you experience something traumatic, the verbal areas of your brain literally become inhibited. So when you try to recall through verbal means what happened, you can't adequately talk about it. The nuance of why it's stuck in you is not going to come up verbally.
Mm.
So it's really important to have these other means where it's the putting the subconscious first that allows what's truly subconsciously underlying whatever symptoms are manifesting to come up within the art. And the last thing I'll say on this question is that in the different settings I've worked, I've gotten to work with a variety of people, ages 18, 19, if they got really injured, severely injured at an academy, all the way up to people in their 60s, people who were enlisted, people who were officers, people who had worked their way up to high offices in the Pentagon, conventional infantry to some of the more specialized units like Marine Recons or EOD from all branches, AFSOC, SEALs all over. And then in Eglin, it was mostly SF, a lot of Green Berets and people in 7th Group or at Hurlburt or EOD. So really all over the place. And what's really nice about that is you get to see how the different things that happen have way different effects on people. If you experience something and you are in conventional infantry, big army, and it happens when you feel like you're just a number, that's going to have a way different effect on you than if you were with a small elite team where you were surrounded all the time with people who were extremely close to you and knew your name, cared about your life, and had your back. It's going to play out in different ways. But yeah, honestly, it's all nuanced per person.
I like that you just never know what you're going to get. That's part of the journey is just seeing what works and what doesn't. And it's kind of building that resilience to push through when one avenue doesn't or leads you to that block. Like you said, like in traditional talk therapy, like you verbally, it just can't come out. I've definitely come across that. I personally have had a TBI, and that's also what brought me to just have an open mind with what works, what doesn't, but just keep trying because in my opinion, I felt like I was living life in hard mode when I wasn't open minded. And now that I have that ability to push through, it's helped so much. It's really cool to see all of the different things that you've done and the different approaches, and also just allowing the patient to let it happen. I think that's the beauty of the journey in a way. I've heard some really amazing things about Walter Reed, and I've personally known some friends that have gone there. So I love that you mentioned that because from hearing their stories and you as a professional, the impact you're making is huge. Even if they're just there for a small amount of time, they can take those tools and implement them wherever they go. I'm glad to see more clinics opening and more people getting into that profession, as well as people being more open minded. It's funny that you mentioned how they'll start off with, like, why the fuck am I here? Then it turns into, like, you see them blossom, you see them get into that groove and have those aha moments. And I think that, like, that's the best part. Like you said, with the women you helped in India, it's like, seeing them smile again. I'm sure in your heart you love seeing that with your patients. And do you ever have patients that check back in with you? Are they allowed to?
Good question. With the clients in those settings, it is really powerful. And sometimes the block isn't just verbal, sometimes it's also really getting at the root of what the block is. There are plenty of patients who would be in the middle of a project and they'd look up at me after having gone through the gamut of all the other providers and not really making progress and people not understanding why. They'd look up and they'd say, I actually like myself again. Like, I actually like myself again. Now I will implement all of the other tools and strategies that I've been taught. Why would I implement them if I don't like myself enough or if I don't think I deserve to feel better? Why would I implement all those other strategies that other providers are throwing my way? Art therapy is really critical to have because, like we said before, it's the language of the soul. I've had clients describe it as trick therapy because it gets right at the root. Like, it bypasses all of our verbal filters. I've had people describe it as the scalpel to the soul. Like, we get right at the core wound, at the core belief that needs to be addressed. It really helps. A lot of times people don't make progress that people expect them to because they're treated just like they just have PTSD, but the issue might more be moral injury, or it might more be complicated grief, disenfranchised grief. It might be like all of these different nuanced conditions that you can only really get at the root of when you have a language of the soul, because that can show you what is truly underlying, why we're stuck, why we're blocked.
Yeah. I feel like I've personally felt that come up too. My thing was just like, all right, let's keep it simple. Let's start with talk therapy. And I was encouraged to journal more. I can do that to an extent. And there's just certain things that I felt like I could never put down on paper. And then that's where art therapy was suggested to me. And I'm like, girl, I can't even draw a cat. And I love cats. You would
Mhm.
think that my obsession would lead to some artistic skill of being able to put the obsession onto paper. And I hesitated, but I was like, why not? Even if it makes no sense, it's just starting with colors and putting the paintbrush on paper. It doesn't have to make sense and it doesn't have to be words. Having that freedom and that ability to not have to put those things on paper, but still express myself through color choice or pencil or pen. The different ways of utilizing that is huge. And that's why even now you're seeing stuff about iPad kids and how it's still important for kids to use a pencil and a paper, just really connecting in that way and letting your heart pour itself out or not. And then like in that process, I'm sure that y'all have like taught them to like, hey, make note of what comes to mind. It's something that unfortunately you can't get with talk therapy. So that's why I love that there's this avenue for all types of people. Having that ability to express what's on your mind and heart is just beautiful. So those breakthroughs and that healing is amazing. And I see that you painted something the other day and it was so pretty. I love how you still utilize that for personal use. Do you find that in a way of like you do it professionally, but you also do it on your own time? Does that kind of help you with the recovery process or like self-care process of like you're tending to a lot of people, you're making a huge difference in their lives, but how do you take care of you so you still have that as your own personal avenue?
Yeah, for sure. A beautiful thing about being an art, becoming an art therapist and getting into touch with how the different, how the different media and processes help you in different ways. So I'll gravitate toward different materials based on how I'm feeling. Sometimes it's meditative, sometimes it's like doing really intricate meditative ink line drawing, sometimes it's ceramic, sometimes it's a charcoal portrait, sometimes it's just abstract self-expression through chalk pastels. It really depends if I'm trying to meditate on something or trying to let my intuition guide it or trying to process something in particular. And as art therapists, we have all that in mind when we're working with people as well. So when they'll come to sessions, they might be suggested to work through a painting or sculpture or a collage. There's all different reasons why we come up with the different projects and materials. And like you said experience that is something. So to connect what you said and also trauma processing, it's a beautiful thing about art therapy. It's tactile. So you're using materials, you're getting that feedback through the material on the surface of whatever you're using. There's a different experience through sculpting with your fingers in the bare clay versus painting and having a brush in between, feeling the paint glide on a paper has a way different effect on you. So I have some clients who are working on anxiety, but we're not actually talking about or processing anything overtly. We're doing Zentangle every time. We're doing meditative drawing every time. And just the act of spending 90 minutes a session doing these meditative drawings as like a 90-minute meditation when people usually feel like they can't even, oftentimes people feel like I can't even meditate for 1 minute. But then when you have like art to focus on to get you into that state, 90 minutes goes by so fast.
Yeah.
And that does treat anxiety, feeling of calm, quiet mind, no anxiety. When things happen in daily life, she knows what that feels like. She can easily remember it, tap back into it. There were certain clients I worked with who couldn't talk through the details of certain things, but there's enough avenues that we can use in art therapy, whether it's creating art, putting it in a sealed envelope, burning it. There's lots of ways that you can use the process to transmute the effects of something within you while getting to keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it doesn't always have to be a process of exposing, but exposing is not a bad thing because shame grows in isolation. You share it with a safe provider and it can dissipate so much just having someone else know what happened and not respond with any judgment. Personally, I do that. It can link to all the other things, but I have a private practice now that's holistic healing.
So what brought you to start your own practice?
I had my dream job. I was a clinical art therapist for the military, loved it. And I found that even when people were gaining the key to unlock their healing or like really understanding what's going on in their subconscious. Once they have that information, that awareness, they can make a lot of progress. But a lot of people are like, okay, now I know this thing, I'm aware of it, but why can't I feel different? I had learned in my own life how powerful yoga had become. I got divorced while I was working at Fort Belvoir. Up until that point, I had done my own talk therapy. I'd done my own art therapy. I would use art therapy on myself. Knew a lot about how I thought. And when you go to school to become a therapist, you become really good at bird's eye viewing the whole dynamics of a situation. I could do all that. But it was getting into yoga that really started to unlock certain locked emotions or experiences that had gotten stuck in my body. And so I started leaning more into that and I learned way more about somatic healing. It became a goal to become a yoga meditation teacher so I could further support my clients through that. So then I wound up going to Eglin, so still working in the DoD, but there I got to be the clinical art therapist, but also the yoga and meditation teacher. I got to start essentially co-treating with myself, co-treating with a lot of other providers too, but I could see I had a bunch of clients who would see me in art therapy and then also would come to yoga or the yoga nidra classes that I would do. And I could see like the nuances of how art therapy was helping them versus how the yoga was helping them versus how the meditation was helping them.
Yeah.
And working with another big difference when I was at Eglin, a lot of my clients were SF and a lot of them were still on frequent deployment rotations. And so the people who could really do art therapy and really get a lot out of art therapy were like in their 19th year. They were allowed to spend a year really going to treatment and doing as much healing as they could do before being released to the civilian world. And when they weren't actively deploying anymore, we could really use art therapy to do all the processing of things that had been suppressed or held within. But the people who were still like frequently deploying, it's really hard on your psychology to be like opening up, closing, opening up, closing, opening up, closing. So what wound up being really helpful, art therapy was good for as a release valve, if that makes sense. But in the yoga and meditation, that was where a lot of the magic happened, where they didn't feel safe totally doing a deep dive processing yet, because they were afraid they'd get like too opened up, basically. But in just coming to yoga, I say, okay, I didn't know I could get my mind quiet. Now
Mm.
I know I can get my mind quiet. I didn't know how to get my mind, body in sync. Now I know how to get my mind and body in sync. And even just in yoga nidras, having a recurring nightmare that would really disrupt their sleep, give them a lot of night terrors, something would shift within one yoga nidra where they'd come back and say, okay, that thing shifted. Now I'm able to sleep the whole night.
That's huge. I love that.
Huge. People, and the yoga and meditation helps people feel into feelings that they thought they couldn't feel anymore. So I had people say like, I didn't think that, basically, like, I thought anger and frustration or being numb was like the totality of my personality now. I didn't know that feeling happy was a possibility for me anymore. I didn't know that feeling joy was a possibility for me anymore.
Yeah.
But now I know it is. I know it's within me. I just need to practice these ways of accessing it. So that was all huge. If seeing me as a yoga teacher, seeing that I'm healthy, they would start to ask me a lot of like health related questions, but that wasn't my role. So I'd refer them to who it was, but I went and did certification in integrative nutrition health coaching to make it more my role, and went through some things where it was really important for me to receive my own energy healing. So really understood like where that accesses you in ways that your mind and body cannot. Like there's certain things that are trapped in your energy, basically, that can cause blockages that you might not be like intellectually aware of, and how that's really important. And then I wound up adding feng shui as well, because a lot of people's complaints after going through these intensive programs were that I make all these gains when I'm in these intensive treatments, but when I go home, I backslide because my environment was just how it was when I left it. So I did all this inner healing work, but my environment stayed the same, and it pulled me backward. So it became really important to me to study feng shui and be able to offer that as well, so that we can use the environment to lift someone up to where, like, to their 2.0, like your environment is a reflection of where you're at. And so we can also use feng shui to help propel you even further, though. So it winds up being like a really nice support that you can put in place. And then do people reach out? So I can't reach out to people first, but like I have videos on YouTube. My business is on social media. So people find me. So I've had people that I worked with in the past find me online and ask if they can work together again, saying this is the most helpful thing that I did when I was in those centers. Can we continue? And yeah, it's fun for me. I have some clients that I first worked with 10 years ago.
Wow.
Now they're in a different phase of life, and the challenges are different, but now I have so many other things to offer them as well. But yeah, I do have some people reach back out, so that's always an option.
I love that. And I think that's really, really cool of you to not see a lack of certification or a lack of knowledge. Like you see that as an opportunity instead of a block. And you're like, hey, this is another way that I can better serve people. I really admire that about you. That way, like you just offer like the whole package. And this is where you hear those things about like connecting mind, body, soul. You mentioned energy. Sometimes I feel it with myself and I feel it with others. It's just like some people have a presence and you can take that for what it is. It could be a good presence, it could be a heavy presence. Sometimes, like, body language is huge. You can just see it on somebody. So, the fact that you can really offer a multitude of services, like I said, for that mind, body, soul healing is just huge. And feng shui, like you said, I think you put it in a really good way. It's like they've done so much healing, they go home and they just feel like a little setback, or they just feel like they don't, it just, the vibes are off. So moving things around, donating things, letting things go, throwing things away, just like cleansing your space. It's you're doing a whole audit of your environment. For some people, they can live in clutter, but I don't suggest that. I love being like neat and tidy. And everyone's version of neat and tidy is a little different, but I'm really glad that you can also offer that because some people really like, if they don't get it, at least not yet, they're like, oh, it's fine. It's just my house. Like I'm just in and out, especially for the patients that you do treat that do deploy a lot. They're in and out. So they don't put too much of an effort into their home space. But if anything, it should be the latter. It should be you're in and out. You want to come back home and just relax and be in a good state of mind and not stressed out or overwhelmed in your own space. So, yeah, you're just hitting all the boxes. I love that so much.
All the boxes. Yeah, I've had my own practice since 2021. So Flourish Momentum, integrative health and wellness for mind, body, soul, and space. And when I and so when I work with people, we start with a free complimentary call so I can get the background and what they're really going after before we have a true session. And then our first true session is a fully comprehensive integrative health assessment. We go through all different categories of life, and I can start to connect the dots. They lay out their goals, they prioritize their goals, and then I can map out the order of the modalities that we'll do to accomplish those goals. And then in the course of working together, everyone has a unique, like, holistic healing journey.
Mhm.
So for someone, we might do art therapy for a while to really process through something and then move into yoga and work it out of their body, and then feng shui to set up the home in a way that will be most supportive. Some people come and their anxiety is so overpowering that we actually start with yoga and Ayurveda. And through simple adjustments in what they're eating or like what breathing practices they can do before going to bed or something like that, even just through making simple shifts in how someone's eating can make their baseline anxiety go from like feeling totally unmanageable to feeling manageable. And then from there, then we can go deeper into the stuff that needs to be worked through. So we have all these options for how to interplay and co-treat amongst ourselves with all of these different modalities to really address mind, body, soul, and space and targeting whatever the current block is in the way that's going to have the most impact.
Oh, yeah, mind, body, soul, and space. I love that. And no, and people really underestimate the difference that can be made with just small daily habits, small changes. And I'm really glad that you have that ability to be like, hey, like we can't crawl, walk, run type of thing. I'm sure that there's people that come to you that are really excited. They want to get into it. They want to do the yoga, do the art and everything else, but you're just like that ability as a professional to be like, hey, baby steps, like we'll work towards that. That's huge. I really appreciate that because I think sometimes people can get a little too lost in the aspects of running a business, but you're dealing with people, you're dealing with their psyche, and it can be a very delicate process. I really appreciate that you have a way about going through these things, like through like morals and ethics, and as a professional I really love that. So what would you say that with starting Flourish Momentum 2021 to now, what have you learned and what are ways that you've improved other than like credentials that have really made you show up better for yourself and for your practice and for your patients?
It's a really good question, and it's one that is rarely asked, but it's really important. So, starting a business is a spiritual journey in and of itself. It really is. And so, there were certain things that I didn't want to be in my own way about. Before, when I would teach yoga, for example, I would spend so many hours the day before, like planning the class, practicing it, like memorizing it, practicing it. It was a whole thing. And that can be really depleting, especially when you like have a full schedule. And so when I first started this business and also getting more comfortable putting yourself out there as a teacher and as a provider in hospitals and military hospitals. My clients were always referred to me. A teacher, you just have all these classes and filled with students. And as a provider at these clinics, there was a constant referral list. I underestimated how hard it would be to find clients and how much of a little tiny fish you feel in like a huge, vast ocean of solopreneurs out there. And I have a history of being really shy. Like anxiety has always been part of my story and was very much a perfectionist and all of these things. And I knew that I couldn't let perfectionism or overthinking or being shy, like I couldn't let those things get in my way because they'd essentially be the death of me in this. Like when you work for yourself, there's no one else you can fault. Like any stagnancy in your growth is on you. So you're just constantly reflecting and pushing through those things. In 2021, so my New Year's Eve resolution, like the challenge I made to myself was put out a YouTube video every single day. And at first, my goal was for the whole year. And I called it like my personal recovering perfectionist project, where every day I just had to get up, come up with an idea, film a video, edit it, put it up. So I'd like within the course of a day with everything else I was juggling, record one, edit it, get it up, move on. That helped start to like really push me out there, building a website, all of that. But then I had already experienced burnout. Like I already know what it's like to, especially being a provider working for the military, you start seeing clients at 7 a.m. So that's like years of waking up at 4:30 or 5 because I would do my meditation first, get ready, commute, get there but 7 a.m. is this early start time, start seeing clients. And I'd get out around 4 or so and then go work out, just also a commute. And I've never been one for fast foods. Then coming home and like making something, all this stuff adds up. I was like 200%, like over 100% at work, over 100% in my personal life, especially when I got divorced at 30 and was like single again, then just no time to really slow down and not just go like full force ahead, like in all of these different avenues of life. But that caught up with me and it was causing some chronic symptoms that were stopping me or getting in my way. So when I started my own business, it was a really important intention to have work-life balance and not create my schedule in a way that would defeat me like physically in the long run. So I think one of the growth aspects was really being very committed to myself and the things that make me healthy for myself and show up best for others. So that's an unwavering, like every day, get up, do my meditation, do my workout before I start seeing anyone. That way, like the day doesn't get away from me and the things I need to do for myself. But it's still easy in the business world. There's always something that you can be doing. So what's worked really well for me is focusing more on like subtle energetic shifts that needed to happen. So instead of forcing my way through like content calendars or doing enough like pushes and offerings and all this, focusing a lot more on my own energy. So, for example, instead of feeling like I'm not doing enough, it's like just putting faith in being. When I got my 300-hour yoga and Ayurveda teacher training last year in Bali, one of the biggest things I got out of the energy of being there was like a flower doesn't try to get smelled. It's not like running around the sidewalk seeking smells. It just blooms. It just blooms and attracts.
Yeah.
And so just really trying to embody that. So I know the more that I'm just like authentically being me and showing up in all the ways that I can, it comes through. Yeah. It definitely like the balance of masculine and feminine, like the structure and the energy, all of that is super intentional.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like I truly know what you're talking about, especially the anxiety and the perfectionism and being able to like listen to your body and like what it needs, and especially to prevent burnout, to catch it before you get there, because then it makes it even harder to get back up to, if you want to call it, 100% after burnout. So for your personal life, for your professional life, it's your way to be able to show up better for you, for your patients, for your partner, for life. And I'm really glad that you really practice that, because sometimes I feel like, especially with the perfectionist portion, it's okay. I have to ABCDEF today, every day. But having that ability to slow down and be like, hey, I can only do ABCDE, maybe F, maybe G. Just and having that ability to be patient and resilient with yourself is huge. Someone told me, they were like, you can't hate yourself into a better version of yourself. I was like, actually,
Yeah.
you could, if you're like David Goggins or Jocko, or people like that. They love suffering, and there's only so much that you can do. And so you're describing a lot of like gentleness, but like self awareness at the same time. And I think that's really beautiful, especially with dealing with something like divorce and being an entrepreneur and things like that. It's really good that you've really implemented that in your personal life. I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's not
you.
easy at all. So truly admire you for the strength that it took for you to really be who you are now.
I appreciate that, and I a lot of it is, like, not listening to the noise because, like, this whole time, it's been very much an intention, like, balance the masculine and the feminine, do the things that I'm also helping others do. Like, I'm not gonna be able to serve people if I'm completely burning myself out. So learning how to optimize my energy, I know when in the day I do certain things best. I've learned how to play with my schedule in a way that I can really optimize, like, my ability to be present with different facets of it. But when I first started, I was following some like women entrepreneurs who were saying you should be doing X, Y, and Z and be balanced in your feminine and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, there's no way you're actually doing all of that and being balanced in your feminine and not secretly burning out. And then now, fast forward 3 years, they're all coming out with books about how much they were burning out 2 years ago when they were in that push. I'm like, see, I knew it. I knew it. I'm just
Yeah.
going to go like my more turtle, genuine, authentic pace, like
Yes,
knowing that's in the highest and best.
absolutely. I feel like that. I'm glad that you said that, because especially with social media, oh man, like the comparison, and you feel like you're not doing enough or what have you. And it's no shade to them,
Right.
but truly, a lot of people, and sometimes they want to put out a positive message. I'm very guilty of that too. I've been in certain headspaces and I'm like, oh, I have to record this episode and I have to put this out there and I have to keep it positive and keep it cute and what have you. And I'm like, no, like my whole reason starting this platform was to keep it real. And that's what
Hmm.
I will do. And so if I have to somehow get a little more creative with being able to put out a positive message, even though at the time I was going through like difficult things or what have you, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to keep it real. And how often do you really see that? There's great people out there. They're putting out great messages, sure. And sometimes you can see right through it. You're like you said, but I know, we know it's okay. They're trying to put a good message out there. They're trying to be proactive and productive, but the honesty is lacking. I feel like a lot of people struggle is, like I said, the comparison. Oh, she's girl bossing to the moon. Like I should be doing that too. And you're just like, no, girly pop. You could do a little TLC, slow down and listen to your body, what your body needs, because what your body needs might be different than the person next to you. And having the tools to be able to connect with yourself, I think, is what's so beautiful. And that's why I wanted to have you on, is the mental health movement has really progressed and people have been more open-minded to holistic approaches to healing. And I'm really grateful for people like you that are putting that out there. And now that you have your own practice, you're really able to sit down with people. You work with military folks and you work with just regular folks, and anyone can find that healing, and getting them to their best potential. It serves the purpose of that's what we're here for. I think sometimes we forget, we allow a uniform or an identity to succumb our purpose, when really our purpose as humans is to, in my opinion, is to do better, to be better, and to teach better through children, through professional studies, through your professions. I'm really glad that you're part of that movement of like, all right, take the uniform off. You're in a t-shirt and jeans. You're sitting down with me. We're getting messy with paint or what have you. And you're Joe Schmo, you're human, and you're allowed to feel these emotions. Sometimes I feel like we can get a little like robotic, or we detach ourselves from our humanity. So the fact that you're out here and you're constantly striving for more, I really admire how you see an opportunity and you're like, you know what? I'm going to do that. Boom, certification acquired. That's amazing. And it's not just for you, but it's really just to truly serve people better. I think that's amazing. And I'm just really impressed and proud of you for being able to show up as something that the world and community really needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, people think it's like a weird on the side, like nicety, but it's truly so preventative. And people also have a misconception that this stuff is like only for minor issues, but oftentimes a lot of medical doctors' success is rated on like how many of their patients they have on long-term medications versus how many people they're healing to not need to come back for a while. And through these means, I've had people completely like correct chronic illnesses and endocrine disorders and all of these things just through coming back to these, we'll call them basics, but like these natural means and methods. It's really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. You're doing the Lord's work. I love it. Now, Jackie, it's late October. We're wrapping up 2024. And I just wanted to ask you one last thing. What's next for you and Flourish Momentum? So, personally and professionally, what does the rest of this year look like for you, and what's on the horizon?
A lot. We're in the process of getting everything together. We'll be moving to Belgium soon for a few years for Zach's job. So I'll be able to keep working. Most of my clients are virtual, but that's going to be a big change. Personally, I'm going deeper into my studies, obviously. So next month, starting on a light language course and a shamanic journeying course, like to embed those things into the So I do a lot of like energetic work in the meditations that I do with people. So I'll be getting deeper in that. And I've been working since 2018 toward a goal of becoming a yoga therapist as well. So right now I use it all therapeutically, obviously, in everything I do, but I'll be able to be a certified international yoga therapist by the end of next year. So I'm about to embark on this like final chat, like I don't want to say final chapter because I'll always keep learning, but final chapter of this certain designation. So right now I'm like technically allowed to use yoga and Ayurveda to treat symptoms, but not quote unquote disorders. But at the end of that, I'll be able to say this is yoga for Parkinson's or different things like that. So that's where I'm going with all that. Yeah, I think that's a lot.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
amazing. There's so many good things.
so many, yeah, and I actually wanted to say one more is that one of the difficulties I've had, a lot of the veterans that come to work with me are people who were career-long veterans and then now have second careers, and so they have the financial means to prioritize their self-care in this way. But people also often come to me and like they want to be able to pay for it, but they're just not in a spot right now where they can. So I've been the last year trying really hard to network and find different opportunities for donors and who want to provide holistic healing for veterans. But I'm the provider, they're the funder, and then the veteran gets to receive and be the client. And so there have been a few people who have gotten their packages funded by mentors, or I have an organization. So that's always an option, just putting that out there.
Yes.
There's an organization called Do a Little Good Foundation who just provided funding for the second package for someone. So we're trying to build up things through them. And then I recently connected with someone who's very well connected with people who like to fund this kind of a thing. So I'm hoping that aspect of my business grows a lot too. If anyone wants this kind of support, like really don't let the financial element stand in the way, because there's ways to receive it. So I'm hoping to grow much more in that this next year as well.
That's awesome. I actually saw a post about that on your page, and it was like someone gifted a package to their loved ones. I was like, what a love language. I don't know. I'm trying not to cry. That's so beautiful and so generous. I'm really glad that you offer that too. And yeah, and I think sometimes that can be the biggest obstacle for a lot of folks with getting care and treatment. So that's really amazing for you to offer that and organizations like that to support folks that are in need of care. That's awesome.
Yes, very
Yeah.
exciting.
You got some great things going on, and I am so excited to just be able to witness that. Please let me know however I can support you. The move especially sounds really exciting. So I'm really excited to see some pretty pictures. And you're taking the dog? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes, the doggy goes. Thank you so much for coming on today and really sharing this beautiful journey of healing that you're on and implementing with other people. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with? Any final notes?
Mm, I think we covered a lot. I have a website if you want to learn more. It's flourishmomentum.com. Really good overview of all the services. And on the About Me page, there's more about my background. There's links to peer-reviewed journal articles that I've written and books that I have chapters on using art therapy to treat complicated grief and disenfranchised grief within military populations. You can learn more through those means. There's 4 freebies depending on what you're interested in, so you can poke around and take advantage of all that. Have one freebie which I'll just highlight. It's a dozen guided meditations, and it's not just going through the motions of having something to offer. I've had really powerful feedback from it. I've had someone say that he was about to take his own life, and he remembered that freebie and did one of the guided meditations and got into a better place. I've had people who have been places where they forgot their sleep meds and did those guided meditations, and they were able to totally fall asleep, stay asleep. So they're really powerful. It really truly is a resource for you. So that's the first freebie listed on the homepage. If you just scroll down to sign up for my newsletter, that's the one you get. So putting that out there. And then we connected on Instagram, flourish_momentum. So I'm pretty active there as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jackie. Wow. That's very generous of you to offer that too. So, y'all, please check it out. Go give Jackie a follow. Thank you so much, Jackie, for your time today.
Thank you for having me.